Welcome, everybody, to Your Distant Neighbor. This is the podcast where we bring on local Arizona guests doing interesting things, talking about a variety of topics throughout the Valley. I'm excited to have Dave King on. Dave, I'm going to tell you right now, all of my friends are so sick of me talking about the Phoenix Suns that I think you and I are going to become best friends.
I'll finally be someone who wants to talk about it as much as you do.
Exactly. So, Dave, you are the managing editor for Bright Side of the Sun, correct? Why don't you talk a little bit about the website you guys have and kind of what you guys do over at Bright Side?
All right. So we have a Suns-only blog that we write every day. I have a staff of about 15 writers who all contribute to varying degrees and in writing daily takes and angles on the Phoenix Suns and in a blog format. So it's brightsideofthesun.com. We have obviously a Twitter presence and a Facebook presence and all that. We have a pretty wide range of readers and listeners and to our weekly podcasts as well. But we're mostly a print, an online blog site to where we'll post 2, 3, 4 articles a day with different takes on things that are happening with the Suns. You might think it's impossible to come up with all that content about one team, but it really isn't. And the more dedicated you are as a fan, the more you think about your favorite team, there's a million angles that you can actually take, and we don't even cover all the angles you possibly can. There are other blogs out there. There's certainly news outlets like Arizona Republic, azcentral.com. Paul Coral's a good colleague of mine anyway. We don't hang out as friends, but we certainly see each other constantly at the Suns games. And ArizonaSports.com and radio and all. So we're just another voice in that realm. But what's great is that we're a voice that can provide editorial content. We of course keep everything factual. We don't make up stories or anything like that, but we offer a different personalized take on things that are happening with the Suns, and we're actually allowed to have opinions on things that are happening. So it's kind of cool. It's really fun. It's free, and we have full media access to the team just as much as anybody else. We have access to all the games, all the practices, press conferences. I can get exclusive interviews with anybody I want to, as long as it's convenient for the person we want to interview. So it's just a really fun, interactive site. We have a lot of readers who comment on a regular basis, but we have readers all over the world and who just read and they don't comment, they don't participate. But we cover 200 different countries. We have readers from, and 250,000 readers a month, unique people a month. Check out our blog. Most of whom are not even in Arizona anymore. They've moved away. They grew up being Suns fans and moved away, or they became fans while Nash was a teammate, or while other prior guys like Charles Barkley, and they're still fans. So it's just really, really fun.
I love it, and we're starting to see that. I couldn't agree more. We're starting to see that more and more, where it's like, especially online on Twitter, we're starting to see Suns fans who, like you said, they're not necessarily local. We get people from internationally who have, for one reason or another, kind of become interested in the team, and I think that's so awesome. So you have a team of writers now. Talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, are all these guys full-time? Do they do it part-time? Do they have other kind of full-time gigs? Are these kind of like just really enthusiastic fans or serious writers, or what's that kind of span look like?
Sure, that's a real good question. They're all really enthusiastic fans. They all do it for free because they have the ability. They've either participated in the community a little bit prior to becoming writers, or they wrote for other blogs, other websites, other newspapers in the past, and they just do it for fun. We all just do it on our own free time. Some of the writers are in college, and they do this because they want to make a career out of it someday. Others are middle-aged guys like myself who've just been fans all our lives. We love to write, and it really gives us a charge to know that people like to read what we have to write. So, but no, it's not a full-time gig for anybody. I spend maybe an hour or two a day on the site doing various things, and it's great. Some people build cars as a hobby. Some people plant gardens as a hobby and work in their garden every day. Others, have different interests. Mine is the Phoenix Suns and the ability to share my thoughts with others and have them want to read them.
Kind of like by fans for the fans. And you guys have such great content. I think it's partially because it is from that fan's perspective where it's an individual and they're passionate about the topic. And, they're like me and you where we're watching the games every single day and I'm yelling at the TV screen and all that stuff. So you talked about kind of full media access. I mean, what does that look like? What does that process? So you guys actually get access to the games on a regular basis, or do you get media access to the games? What does that process kind of look like?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say it is by fans for the fans, but we have a high standard of expectation. I don't let anybody write for the site who make things up or create controversies that don't exist. We'll certainly forward a theme. Like we spent a lot of time talking about Markieff Morris over the past summer, for example, because he got himself in the news. And we can have an opinion on things, but all of our actual information has to be accurate. And so we have actually a high level of credibility with the Suns organization itself. And as far as I can tell, this season we are the only blog, the only non-professional, full-time paid writers access team. We're the only blog who doesn't do this for a living 100% of their day that has full access to the team, just like all the pros do, because we are pros. I personally do get paid a small amount a month, only maybe a couple $100 a month to participate, which is nothing. That's like 50 cents an hour, I think, or something along that line. But I do have a high standard of expectation for myself. I write on a very believable, accurate level, and so the Suns believe in me as a blogger that I'm not going to put them in a bad light that isn't true. I mean, they're okay with negative stories as long as they're accurate negative stories. It's okay to say that they made a bad move, but it can't be totally made up information. So, but as far as media access, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's so important too, because if you do any kind of online research about basketball or any sport, there's so much like what they just call clickbait out there, right? It's just
right.
Salacious titles that they want people to click on and drive their traffic up, their traffic and their views up. So I think that's great.
Yeah, we absolutely don't mislead people. We'll, of course, the internet is to a degree all about clickbait, but I require all of our stories to be supportive of the title. You see so many articles out there where the title says one thing, and then there's nothing to back it up in the story at all that supports the sensationalism in the title. So we don't do anything like that. We use, obviously, you got to have the keywords in there. You've got to get people to want to click on your article. You don't title an article, "Hey, I wrote something about the Sun." You have the keywords in there, but we don't make stuff up and we don't mislead people. So that's really important, and that helps the credibility with the team. As far as media access, I have a full season pass as a media member for the Suns. I sit in media row with the other guys. I have access to the locker room before and after games, pre-game interviews and post-game interviews with the coach. We have access to practices. They only let any media members, not just me, but anybody. They limit our access to practices to the last 5 minutes or so, and then in an interview session. I have a full-time job personally that takes up my middays, and so I don't get to many practices, but I do have access when I want to. And other folks from my blog can get to practices on a whenever it's convenient for them as well. So I think we've got a really good balance here on this blog of being by the fans for the fans, but also on a semi and almost entirely professional level.
Are a lot of the writers local, or are they kind of span geographically as well, where we have Suns fans from all over kind of writing on Brightside?
Sure, absolutely. They're all over the country. There's only about out of the 15 or 17 contributors right now, only 5, maybe 6 live in Phoenix at the moment.
Oh.
The rest either used to live in Phoenix, and now we've got people in California, we've got people in Washington, things like that, all over the country as well as all over the world. We've got some infrequent contributors who are, let's see, one of them's from, certainly one's still from Slovenia. We used to have one from, I'm not sure if it was the Philippines. But anyway, we've had them all over the world. It comes and goes with when you've got players on your team, right? So when we had Marcin Gortat on the Suns, we had a couple of Polish writers who would contribute to the site. When we had Goran Dragic and his brother Zoran, we had several Slovenians contributing to the site. I've got a guy who lives in Paris, I believe, right now, who contributes infrequently too. But it all depends on who's on the team. I'm sure as Mirza Teletovic gets more ingrained in the team, he's from Bosnia. We've got some commenters now from Bosnia. We'll probably get a writer or two from Bosnia. So I think it's just really fun and interesting to have such a wide, diverse range of writers and content on the site.
Excellent, excellent. So, and you talked a little bit about kind of media access, and as a fan-based blog, even though it's got a high credibility, was there ever any pushback in the beginning from giving you guys that media access, or have you
Absolutely.
noticed any kind of? There was. How long? I mean, how long was that kind of battle?
Sure. So our blog itself has been around since 2006. We started getting media access back, I believe, in 2009. During the last year the Suns went to the Western Conference Finals, I think was the first year our prior managing editor had a full hard season credential, which means you can have access to anything without calling ahead. And you've always got a seat at the table and everything. So I think that started that year. But then he moved on to a different position, and then I stepped in, and I had to prove myself. It took a couple of years to get full-time access to the team. Where in the interim, I had to ask for one game at a time. I never got turned down, actually, because I had good credibility when I first started trying to get access. But for the Suns, it's all about trust. And if they don't trust me to cover the team with accuracy and a high level of professionalism, they won't give you access. So, but definitely I've been able to prove that. But it was an uphill battle, and if I had gone down the wrong path and started being one of the, what people consider a traditional blogger, which is somebody who just speaks to be heard and doesn't care about how many ethics they're displaying at any one time, then I would not have access today. So definitely it was something I had to work for.
Great. And so do you ever notice anything, or do you eventually just build trust with the players and the coaches as well? I mean, was there ever any pushback from them, or maybe looking towards, guys from AZ Sports or companies like ESPN or some of these big national news syndicates? Would those individuals ever lean on those guys for questions or whatnot first because you're specifically online, or is that always kind of like an open field?
Well, I'll tell you this. The only difference among all the media, the only difference is how often they see you, and if they read what's written about them, which is true of most of them, even though they won't admit it. In fact, probably 95% of them, even though they won't admit it. If they like what you write about them, they're more likely to talk to you. So it doesn't have anything to do with whether you're from a blog or from a radio show or from a newspaper or a magazine, national or local. It's about whether they built a connection with you. So, if in my case, for example, I don't go to all the practices, and I don't go to the road games like the beat writer for AZ Central, and one of the radio guys, I believe, goes to all the road games, and there's always an AP guy in every city as well. The players and the coaches recognize them by face, and if they're believable, they're trustworthy, then they might open up a little bit more to those guys. But in general, players would rather not talk to the media because sometimes the media can twist their words. Even the guys they like can sometimes twist their words, but they do it as a job. I've really enjoyed personally covering Alvin Gentry back when he was the coach of the Suns, and now Jeff Hornacek as the coach of the Suns. There's been a pretty good camaraderie, especially with Jeff Hornacek. He's such a nice guy, and he doesn't have any qualms against talking to the media and being open. because the more transparent you are, the harder it is for us to twist what you say. With the players, they're not as savvy with talking. They're not as clear with their words, especially right after a game when they're still emotionally invested in what just happened. And so they're going to be a little bit more reticent. So, no, I don't think it's different between bloggers and newspaper guys and radio guys. I think it's just on a one-on-one personality level and whether you've made a connection or not.
That makes a lot of sense too. Is if they've read your stuff and they kind of like what you've written about them or not, I can see them leaning one way or another. Once you've started to build some of this,
I've actually had a couple when I'll actually introduce myself. Usually we don't reintroduce ourselves when we do interviews, because there's a big scrum of people, or you're barely catching them in the hallway, and you say, "Hey, you got a sec?" And they know you're media because you got your badge on and all that. But on the times that I do I think to introduce myself and say, "Hey, I'm Dave King with Bright Side of the Sun," most of the time I've actually got a very positive reaction from the guys saying, "Hey, I really like what you guys' work," and blah, blah, blah. So that does help. And the media members who are more outgoing in reintroducing themselves every time until you have a personal connection or creating that personal connection in another way, they have it a little bit easier on getting the players to open up. But the players are really good. They'll do interviews to anybody who has the badge and access. It's just how much they open up. And I have been pleasantly surprised in the last couple of years at how many of them actually do know my work after I introduce myself, because when I'm just online, they don't know faces. And whereas with TV guys, you know their face.
Yeah, and so when you build rapport with one of these players, like I'm going to use Goran Dragic. Is it tough when they get traded? Is it a business? I would imagine. Goran Dragic was, kind of becoming the next Steve Nash, and kind of loved here in the Valley, especially from a fan's perspective. And the way he kind of, I know the little bit of backlash, and we'll kind of get in some of the Suns summer stuff here in a little bit, but, kind of the backlash he had towards the Suns front office. Does that feel a little personal? Especially when you spent a ton of time with someone like Goran Dragic, or is that just business as usual?
No, that's really that's a really good question. And actually, that is another one of the players that I thought I had developed a little bit of a connection with. Mostly it's because Goran is just such a nice guy. He's nice to everybody. And he was especially nice to the media when some of the other players weren't as nice to media in general. It doesn't matter who you wrote for or talked for. So I had developed what I thought was a pretty good relationship with him, in that I thought he was being pretty transparent and honest. And he was such a nice guy. But behind the scenes, he was unhappy with his role on the Suns. He was unhappy with being marginalized in his final year on the Suns, even though he had been such a key figure the prior couple of years, and he thought he had arrived, and now all of a sudden the Suns had acquired not one but two guys that played the same position. They were expected to all trade off. And Goran is not an alpha in the locker room in terms of, like Kobe said famously when I think when Dwight Howard was acquired by the Lakers a few years ago, and Steve Nash was acquired by the Lakers, I think maybe the same summer, that I eat first. So Kobe established right away who was the alpha, and the rest were all the betas. Didn't matter whether they were alphas on their prior team or not. And because Kobe was such a force, everyone went with it. Now, of course, that season did not go well for the Lakers because Kobe should not have eaten first. But that's another story. Kobe established himself. Whereas Goran is not an I eat first kind of person. His first reaction was to acquiesce. Isaiah Thomas and Eric Bledsoe were more, in different ways, more assertive than Goran. So Goran ended up being third fiddle on that trio. And it wasn't anything the coaches designed. It wasn't anything the front office expected. It just happened. And part of it, I'm not saying it was Goran's fault. I'm saying it was a combination of the Suns shouldn't have put those three together. They should have known how their personalities would play out. But I don't think anybody expected Goran to demand a trade halfway through his first season with those other two guys. And that kind of threw everybody for a loop, including me. Right before that All-Star break, when he went to Hawaii, it was an extra long All-Star break. right before that, he and I were talking about how he was going to refocus for the second half of the season. We were even talking off the record a little bit about just how, things are fine. They seem a little awkward. But he'll get by. Everything will be good. And he was looking forward to, he'd see me after the break, and he was looking forward to the time off to decompress. And then literally a week later, he was demanding a trade. He was totally shut off from the team, and he was traded before they ever played another game, and I didn't get a chance to speak to him again after that because I wasn't able to go to that famous press conference where he totally laid into the Suns to the media saying he doesn't trust him anymore. That was a whole different guy. But that just goes to show you only get so close with the players. You're not their friend. You don't go some of these media guys will go out to dinner with players and they'll develop more of a personal relationship. But not anybody really local does that. And so that's always, that's something to remind yourself as a fan and as a media member in my case. Don't emotionally invest yourself in a player because they're not emotionally invested in you. And less than you want to believe, they're not really emotionally invested in the team. Very few players play for that team and want to be with that team for the rest of their lives. And the players who do get emotionally invested in their team end up getting really frustrated because the team is not emotionally invested in them. The team is emotionally invested in wins and money, and that's just the way it is. It's a business. So I have had to learn to dial back my intensity and desire for individuals on the team to live up to my expectations. I just allow it to happen now. I used to be one of those fans who would actually lose weight during a game. I'd get so worked up and so nervous, and I'd be shaking and clammy and all that, and whether I was at home or at the game, because I had season tickets too. Either way, it would just be one of those nerve-wracking things. Now in the media, I'm really emotionally separated while the game is going on, and it actually makes it easier for me. I can sleep better at night.
I can imagine that. And, I think, too, with the Goran Dragic stuff, I mean, just the way it progressed so quickly, like you said, last season, I think kind of threw everyone through a loop. And my gut reaction to that whole thing and not having some of the insights that you had was, it was obviously that trip to Hawaii where it was like, what was said during that trip, either by his agent or by Ryan McDonough
Right.
to his representation, that changed his mind so much. And I always come back to, I wonder if the Suns had kind of flat out told him, hey, we're not going to give you, I mean, what did he make this summer? Like $18 million a year? For some reason, that just doesn't seem like a contract that Ryan McDonough would have done, right? And so that's what always kind of stuck in my head. But like you said, I mean, that kind of flip of a switch, I think kind of everyone.
The way I actually heard it played out was Goran was going to be a free agent this summer. And like you said, he got an $18 million contract. And a lot of these contracts are prepaid for the new collective bargaining agreement where teams are going to have literally 40% more money than they used to. I mean, that's almost doubling their cash flow from TV revenue, which is what player salaries are directly based on, is team revenue, which means player salaries are going to rise 40% in the next few years. And so Goran and a lot of free agents from last summer were being paid on future salaries, and so $18 million wasn't so bad in that regard. But really, he's approaching 30, and he only had really one great season in his career, and so maybe it was a little much. But what I had heard was actually he did think he could get that $18 million, and he wanted to do it for a team that would make him a full-time 100% point guard, and not try to make him in a two-point guard system like the Suns have been doing. And so his agent had already informed the Suns that he really was not going to sign a new contract that summer. And so maybe they ought to trade him at the deadline to get something for him before he just left for nothing 3 months later. And the Suns actually didn't believe it at first. And were going to keep him through the deadline and had told him while he was in Hawaii that they were not going to trade him. They were just going to keep him through the season and then try to talk him into a contract that summer. And for some reason, that triggered Goran and his agent to decide that he was going to come back and make it impossible for the Suns to actually keep him by saying he didn't trust them and calling them out personally really forced the Suns' hand, and they actually got pretty lucky getting 2 future first-round picks for Goran under those circumstances.
Especially considering one of them's unprotected, which I wonder if that's going to become a story maybe not a lot of people remember 3-4 years from now when that pick actually comes to fruition, because very rarely do we see unprotected picks being dealt out, right? I mean, who knows where the Miami Heat are going to be in a couple of years. But let's talk about a little bit. So what are your thoughts on the upcoming season? So Suns season starts, the basketball season starts next week. Where do you think the Suns, the Western Conference, for those who haven't been following basketball a ton, is extraordinarily difficult compared to the Eastern Conference? It's almost like unfairly so. And so the Suns have been kind of a fringe playoff team for about 2 years now. I mean, where do you think they fall, especially after some of these off-season moves in that Western Conference?
I think they fall on the fringes again. The Western Conference is really hard, and so there's 8 teams out of 14 who make the playoffs, so it seems like it ought to be easy to make the playoffs. Unfortunately, it's not. There are 8 to 10 really solid playoff-worthy teams. When you compare the teams that make the playoffs over the past 10 to 15 years, the talent level on those teams, there's at least 8, if not 10, of which the Suns are in that bottom 3 or 4, that are worthy of making the postseason and trying to prove themselves and get all the way to the finals. Unfortunately, the rule is 8, so 1 or 2 teams are going to be very disappointed, even though they are they're good enough to have made it. And then there's a big drop off to the bottom 4 teams, which will be some of the worst in the league. And so the team that finishes 9th or 10th in the West are going to be head and shoulders above the other players who don't make the playoffs. And that's really frustrating. And that's what the Suns have done for 2 years in a row. And that's probably what they're going to be facing again this coming season. Things are going to have to break right. They're going to have to all play selflessly. Last year they played selfishly. And they're going to have to play the right way and win enough tight games to make them the team who wins the 2 or 3 extra that gets them in over the other teams that are about the same talent level as them.
Yeah. And so last year we won 39 games. We had a record high 5 buzzer beater losses, which blows my mind. I mean, I think I've had a mini heart attack each one of those games. And so if anything close to that happens again this year, I might have to forget my Suns fandom, because that was just absolutely heartbreaking. But I tend to be a little bit on the positive side. I really so the Suns this year signed Tyson Chandler. And I think, so they 39 wins last year. They had a really bad run towards the end. If half of those 5 games go in their favor and we don't have that bad run, just maybe we can come in at that 45 to 47 wins again this year and maybe take that 8th spot. What are your thoughts on the addition of Tyson Chandler?
Yeah, I think Tyson Chandler is going to be very positive. What the Suns really lacked last year was a veteran who could help them stay even-keeled and stay in a winning attitude all season long, no matter what was happening. And you need veterans who've been in the playoffs, who know what it takes to make it in the playoffs and succeed in the playoffs, who can actually lead the way, set the tone in the locker room. All the Suns had last year was young players, and yeah, I mean, you're talking mid-20s, may or may not be young in athlete years, but for these guys, NBA maturity-wise, they were pretty darn young, and that caused them to lose games. Usually, when you've got an overly young team, those are the ones who are in the bottom 4 of the conference, and they're the ones getting the high draft picks for next year, and they stay young, and they continue to not win as many games as they could based on talent because they're too young. Like the Minnesota Timberwolves, for example. They're going to be too young to win a lot of games this year because they don't have the right kind of veterans in the locker room to raise the mentality of the rest of the team. The Suns are getting to the point where they could get overwhelmed by youth again, or they could rise above with the help of Tyson Chandler and a couple of other veterans they've signed to help raise the expectations in the locker room, preparation for games, practice habits, all that, to make you really successful. So it's quite possible because of Tyson Chandler, even though he himself may not be an all-star or a player of the year and this and that anymore, because he's been an all-star in the past, but he's also 33 now. But it could be that his overall mentality helps raise the team and gets them into that playoff contender mode. Or it could all melt down like it did last year. So I don't know. I'm a little on the fence. I want to wait until at least a week of the season is over, maybe a month of the season, before I kind of have a feel for what this team is going to be this year.
I couldn't agree more. And it seems, you're right. We're kind of on that fence, and it's like we could have a tumultuous year again where things go off the hinges. But at the same time, I mean, at this point, we've got Bledsoe, who's a young talent locked down for 4 or 5 years. They just signed Brandon Knight, who, the more you watch Brandon Knight play, for me at least, you start to realize how good he really is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Tyson Chandler, you're right. I think for the next year or two, he's a huge pickup, and then hopefully the Suns' magical, healing touch can at least keep him young, or he can at least tutor Alex Len to kind of the next big thing. But what are your thoughts on T.J. Warren? I liked them picking up T.J. Warren, drafting him last year, and he seems to be progressing really well. Do you see him taking over the starting spot, or do you get a sense that they like PJ Tucker there because of his defense?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we have to wait and see how it plays out, and it's quite possible that Coach Hornacek will make the wrong decision. In retrospect, it's always easier to look backwards than it is to look forwards. T.J. Warren can provide instant offense, and he can really deliver points from no matter who's on him defensively, because he's so creative with how he gets a shot off and how he moves off the ball and gets himself close to the rim and then ends up putting up the shot he wants to. He's not the prettiest looking player as far as, the way he plays, but he is highly effective. His problem is that he doesn't really look to rebound. So you've got basically only 2 guys now in your lineup because your guards generally don't rebound very well either. Now you're down to only 2 guys who really are looking at the rim when the other team is shooting to try to get to the rebound. And that doesn't really help, whereas P.J. Tucker is one of the best rebounders in the league from the small forward position. So that gives you 3 guys who are looking at the rim, or allowing someone like a Markieff Morris or a Tyson Chandler or Alex Len to take off early for going down the other end and allowing P.J. to stay behind and get the rebound. And also P.J. will actually play defense. I know these names sound very familiar. P.J. Tucker being the bigger, burlier one. He's shorter. He's about 250 pounds, though, and he plays defense like crazy, but he can't score, whereas T.J. Warren is younger. He's skinnier. He doesn't play defense. He doesn't rebound, but he scores like crazy. So I don't care who starts this year. I only care that by the end of the game, they've traded off their minutes, and they're producing at a high level as a composite small forward who might have played 48 minutes. And it's going to be up to Hornacek to put the right one in at the right time, and that's going to be not easy for him. It's much easier to have a star. It's much easier to play Anthony Davis 38, 40 minutes a game than it is to trade off P.J. Tucker and T.J. Warren for that same number of minutes and try to get approximate output.
Yeah, and P.J. Tucker, I mean, 2 years ago, he had that corner 3 down to a science. Like, he had, I think at one point in time in the season, had like one of the highest 3-point percentage made. And last year he just couldn't find it. And I don't know if that was because we lost Channing Frye and everything started to collapse in a little bit and there wasn't as much space. But I think TJ and PJ tend to balance each other out. I think you're right. As long as Hornacek can figure out the best way to kind of balance those two, hopefully we're in good hands. And we've got kind of a tool for whatever we need. If we need something more defensive, PJ Tucker has been one to kind of lock down as a defender when needed. And TJ is, I call him whoop-de-whoop Warren because he just has some of the most, like you said, creative offensive skills that anyone's ever seen. And I think he has the potential, and maybe this is just the fandom in me, to be a star in the league one day. and hopefully he just gets that minutes to kind of shine. You talked a little bit about off-season moves. We were in the running for LaMarcus Aldridge, and we'll talk for a few minutes about LaMarcus and then a few minutes about kind of the trade that upset Markieff. How big do you think it is for the Suns and Phoenix in general just to be in the conversation? The fact that LaMarcus had us as one of his top two teams and we were going up against the Spurs as a potential free agent destination.
Yeah, I thought that played out really interesting and unexpectedly positive for the Suns. When you don't, the Suns have not signed a really high-profile free agent in basically ever. Well, they got Tom Gugliotta back in 1999, or was it the spring of 2000? It was after a lockout, so I think it was January of 99, if I get it right. But anyway, he was the last big dollar other team signing that the Suns have made, which means they haven't made any this millennium like that. And the reason is that these big dollar guys, if they're going to change teams at all, they're going to want to go to the biggest markets they can get to. So the Knicks and the Lakers and the Celtics and all that, they'll get some of the bigger free agents. But it's also that the bigger free agents, the better free agents, end up staying with their own teams almost all the time because their own team can offer more money under the terms of the collective bargaining agreement. So the best players rarely change teams. So when somebody is willing to change teams, to have the Suns being in the finalists was pretty cool. And I actually think LaMarcus Aldridge, there is a chance that he's going to wish he had signed with the Suns because the Suns would have allowed him to be himself, which is a 22 points, 10 rebound guy, getting most of the shots on offense. The team, and it sounds, well, obviously you would if he's going to put up 22 and 10, but with the Spurs, they are so interested in team basketball. They've got 3 Hall of Famers in their lineup right now. They're on the downsides of their career, but there's still 3 Hall of Famers there, plus a potential future Hall of Famer in Kawhi Leonard. And then Aldridge adds himself to that, which sounds like it's a championship waiting to happen, and it could happen that way. But those aging Hall of Famers on the Spurs could decide that they're old all of a sudden, and Aldridge may never get any further than he did with Portland, which could be the second round of the playoffs. And he may look back on saying, gosh, first I'm in a sharing offense where I only get 15 points a game instead of 20 or 25. And I'm not even winning any more than I used to when I was the key man. Maybe I should have signed with the Suns. So he may do that. I think probably, though, what will happen is because the Spurs will win a freaking championship and he'll be happy that he signed with them.
And that's how it seems to go, right? I tend to agree with you. I mean, the Spurs are obviously a great organization, but it just seems like they've got a lot of big guys now. They've got they signed David West, they signed LaMarcus Aldridge, they've got Tim Duncan, they've got Kawhi at the 3 spot. I'm not sure who's playing center for them now that they lost their center, but I agree with you. I think he had such a good opportunity here in Phoenix, and maybe that's what it was, and maybe he recognized it. I think if we added him and Tyson Chandler with a combination of Brandon Knight and Bledsoe and PJ Tucker and Markieff coming off the bench, I think we would have been a playoff team, if not a contender. But so in the midst of trying to woo LaMarcus Aldridge, the Suns traded away a few players, one being Markieff Morris, Markieff's twin brother. Was that an interesting move to you? I guess the one thing I never understood is why would they trade him away before getting a commitment from LaMarcus? And I know the Suns' kind of line was we were always going to make this trade. This was something we were always going to do. But if that's really the case, I mean, why did they get pennies on the dollar? You know what I mean? It seemed strange to poke the sleeping bear and then not have LaMarcus Aldridge sign. You know what I mean?
I do. But I think it was all a matter of timing. I mean, we're talking literally about a 48-hour period. We're talking to midnight on July 1, midnight on July 1 to midday on the 3rd. So actually probably literally a 40-hour period where the Suns went from having neither Tyson Chandler or LaMarcus Aldridge or maybe even Brandon Knight because he was a restricted free agent to within the first 12 hours getting Chandler and Knight to both agree to join the Suns and both of them to show up in a recruiting pitch to LaMarcus Aldridge, and then all of a sudden LaMarcus Aldridge that overnight going, maybe I should sign with the Suns. But you don't have enough money, Phoenix. So there's this thing called a salary cap in the NBA, and every team can max out at a certain expenditure unless they're re-signing their own players, and their own players have been with them for a while. It's called the Larry Bird exception from literally back in the 80s. So the Suns had a limitation where they could not add both Chandler and LaMarcus Aldridge, and they didn't even really have enough room just for LaMarcus Aldridge even, without making some kind of salary dump trade that brought nothing back. And they needed to make the trade really fast in order to convince, while Aldridge was still thinking, and he was supposed to decide within a day or so, the Suns had to find a team that willing to take enough salary off their hands to make all the numbers work to be able to bring Aldridge in if he agreed to sign. Because there was no way Portland was going to do this thing called a sign and trade where the Suns could have just sent all that salary to Portland to bring in LaMarcus Aldridge to the Suns. Portland clearly didn't want to do anything like that. So the Suns had to have basically free money, free room under the cap. So they had to make a dump. And couple that with the fact that Markieff Morris had become a problem in the locker room and a problem for the front office and a problem for the coach. He got into a yelling match with the coach on the sideline earlier in the year. The Suns had no qualms about dumping Marcus on some other team as long as they just got the free space and they could sign their target. So basically this was all happening. It was a combination of needing the salary cap space and doing a dump to do it, because you can't bring value back or that's got salary tied to it. You need to actually dump salary. And they were ready to move on from Marcus, and this was a convenient way to do it.
And all those are great points. And so, obviously I'm not a twin, but I would imagine, as a twin, when your brother gets traded away, I think they got notified while they were on vacation. That obviously made Markieff a little bit upset, and he had some things to say.
They're the ones who chose to go on vacation in early July, though.
Right. This is also true.
No, move this free agent window to accommodate the Morris' vacation plans.
Well, they should have, Dave. You know what I mean? If they were,
I'm not going after you. I'm just saying a lot of people have said that. Why would the Suns do this while they're on vacation? They're the ones who chose to go on vacation during that 3 days.
It's too funny. I mean, and that's just one of those things. And it's one of the things, too, just about basketball, like you talked about, is the players don't necessarily fall in love with an organization, and the organization cares about wins, right? So especially Ryan McDonough, uses the pieces as chips and assets, and he moved them. And so this obviously made Markieff upset. He had some things to say about the Suns and about the fans. And what were your thoughts? Did you think they were going to trade Markieff over the summer? Do you get a sense now that he's a little bit more at home in some of your media stuff at training camp and whatnot? Does he seem to be settling in? Or is there still seem to be animosity?
Yeah, there's been an interesting development. So one thing I'll say is that, you're right, that Ryan McDonough treats people like assets. But you know what? Every GM in the league treats people like assets except for the Buss family in Los Angeles. They just, they're out and out admitting that they're paying Kobe for his career rather than his current performance, and they're giving him $25 million a year, which is basically half the salary cap for one player, and it's kind of killing him. So other than that, the rest of the league, as much as GMs want you to think that they love everything about their team and wouldn't make it, every GM makes trades, every GM signs new players, every GM replaces players. Mark Cuban very publicly came out this week because Tyson Chandler, who the Suns signed this summer, the only reason the Suns signed Tyson Chandler is because the Mavericks let him go. They were looking at replacing him with something younger and better in DeAndre Jordan during that same 2 or 3 days in that free agency period. And Tyson Chandler had the opportunity, unlike Markieff Morris, to say, screw you, I'm going to go somewhere else if I'm not your number one option. So he immediately signed with the Suns, and the Mavericks never did get that guy they were going to replace him with, and now the Mavericks got stuck with Zaza Pachulia, which is, for anyone who doesn't know the NBA, a massive downgrade. So
that's going to hurt them. I think that's going to hurt them so bad. But regardless,
they're not going to make the playoffs because they're relying on Zaza Pachulia to be their starting center. And plus other things. I mean, Dirk is 92 years old now, I think, and other players are declining as well. But that's a team the Suns have to beat out for the playoffs. So I hope my predictions are right on that. But anyway, every GM rolls the dice. Every GM plays poker. You put your chips in the middle and you hope to win the hand. Dallas lost the hand. The Suns kind of had a push where they lost Aldridge, but they gained Chandler. And, that's just the way it goes. And the Clippers won because they were able to keep DeAndre Jordan in their fold, even though there's no way they were going to be able to replace him because of that salary cap, too. They'd already overspent on other players. So the Clippers were winners, the Mavericks were losers, and the Suns were a push. And unfortunately, when you come out of the offseason as a push and you weren't a playoff team before, that's not awesome. So we'll see how this plays out. But back to Markieff Morris. He was frustrated because the Suns wanted to replace him with someone better. But he's under contract, so he didn't get the luxury that Chandler did to go ahead and sign with a different team. He has to stay with the Suns unless the Suns trade him. So he tried a little bit of public humiliation against the Suns during the summer to see if he could do the same thing Dragic had done, potentially. I'm guessing this was his thinking. He's not talking to media very much. So this was my conclusions is during the summer when you're not with your team and there's no mandatory reporting dates and all that, you can be a little bit, standoffish and you can say to random people you want to be traded. But as soon as it starts affecting your paycheck, you show up and you play. And that's exactly what Markieff did. Suns didn't trade him because they couldn't improve on him. So why would you do a trade down on purpose? So they couldn't improve on him, so they're bringing him back. Everyone talked to him. Tyson Chandler said, hey, look, you're not the first person who was treated as second fiddle. Just buck up and let's play and let's be buddies and don't worry about the GM. Just worry about your teammates and play. And so far, Markieff has been a perfect teammate and just still doesn't like the media. And that's okay.
Yeah, and I had said, there's a lot of fans that were just immediately wanted, his head on a stake, and we're like, trade him for pennies on the dollar, just get rid of him. He's a cancer. And I was always my opinion that I knew McDonough wasn't going to trade him unless he could get at least equal value back. Right. That's just how McDonough operates. And the fact that, too, Markieff is on such a team-friendly contract where, you know what I mean? You're right. He just doesn't have any leverage. So, maybe he gets traded throughout the season. I know in December, some of those free agents that get signed on to teams, those can be traded. So, maybe at some point in time, when Markieff proves himself and he can prove he's a team player.
But only if it's an upgrade.
Exactly. Only if it's an upgrade. Maybe he gets traded then, but I'm with you. And I think Markieff is good. I think he's improving. What I've seen in preseason, I think he's only getting better. And so if he continues to improve and he starts to settle in as the Suns starting power forward, I think, especially at that $8 million a year, I think it could be beneficial. But, that whole thing was just so many people were blown away by it locally and nationally. It definitely made headlines. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. So
it made headlines, and most people wanted him traded. But you know what? As soon as he was made available to the public in the Suns preseason scrimmage, which was free to the public, so anybody could go, rich, poor, anybody could show up to that scrimmage. Almost nobody booed him, and that would have been the perfect time for the fans to have booed him because it wasn't televised. It wasn't, it didn't have any. There was no stakes. There was no skin in the game by, you have to beat that other team, so we're going to cheer you on. They could have booed him there. No. Fans stayed an hour after the game to get his autograph. They cheered him in the stands. And then preseason introductions, all preseason long, he got cheered like crazy. So fans have very short memories. If you perform well, you help the team win, and you smile every once in a while toward the camera and toward the stands, fans are going to love you. Yeah, I know that sounds shallow and simple, but it just happens to be the truth.
Yeah, and good on Markieff for turning that kind of cheek, because I know part of his his lines over the summer was that he was going to make things difficult. And again, I think it's one thing to say that you're going to make things difficult and then actually show up to media day and make things difficult. But good for him on putting on a smiling face every once in a while and at least kind of going through the motions. And it sounds like Tyson Chandler's warmed up to him a little bit, and he's warmed up to his teammates, and so hopefully good stuff from him. I know you got to go in a few minutes. I just wanted, last thing, I know Brightside is doing raising some money for tickets for kids. Is that right? Why don't you talk a little bit about that as we wrap up here?
Absolutely. So we do all this stuff just because we love the Suns, and what I wanted to be able to do this year is give back a little bit. And try to create new Suns fans among the younger generation. And so it was a perfect opportunity. I don't have the funds to do that myself. I can't personally donate money to take a bunch of people to a Suns game. They're expensive tickets. But the Suns approached me, and they said, hey, why don't we do something together? Why don't we help? We'll get you discounted tickets. If you and your readers can raise money and buy tickets for kids, we'll find underprivileged kids who've never been to Suns games, and we'll take them to a game this year. So we found a game November 14th. It's a Saturday night game against the Denver Nuggets, and the Suns have promised up to 1,000 tickets. If we can raise the money, they will do 1,000 tickets for $16 a piece. It'll be in the upper level, but it'll be an awesome experience for these kids. And all we have to do is raise the money. Well, that sounded pretty daunting to me. I'm like, what? How are we going to raise $16,000 when none of us do this for anything and we don't have any income revenue? So I posed it to our readers, and I said, hey, if we do this collectively, if we do this as a group, and I'm posing it to your listeners as well, you just have to go to our website, brightsideofthesun.com, and find an article somewhere on the page about our ticket drive. You can donate very easily $16 and send a kid to a game on November 14th. Or if you buy 10 tickets by donating $160, you get your own pair of lower bowl tickets the Suns will give you for free in the lower bowl that are worth about that much money anyway if you had bought them online. And you get to go to the game too, plus the 10 kids you bought tickets for. And it makes it a really great night. We started this drive a little under 2 weeks ago, and we've raised so far 276 seats worth of donations, which is pretty darn awesome considering we've never done anything like this before, and it's only been a week and a half. We've got about 2.5, 3 weeks left before we have to stop selling tickets, and we have to, get prepared for the game itself. It's only on November 14th, so it's less than a month away. We want to get up to 1,000 of these tickets. We want to fill up a couple of sections up there, maybe 3 or 4 sections up there on the upper level with the kids we paid for to come to the game and cheer on the Suns. And we're going to have a few dozen of our donators who bought 10 tickets at a time will be at the game as well. It's going to be great. We're calling it Brightside Night. The Suns are supporting it. We're going to have some T-shirts we're going to be giving out for people that want them and to signify the event. It's going to be so much fun. The Gorilla's going to go up there and high-five them and everything. It's going to be a really, really good time, and it's all for charity. It's all giving back to the community and making new Suns fans among the younger generation.
Amazing. And what you said, too, about the 10 tickets, I mean, that is a steal. I mean, if you've ever looked at lower bowl tickets, like you said, they cost about that much anyways. So a great opportunity. Awesome for you guys for stepping up and supporting the community and, increasing the Suns fan base. And hopefully in 5 years and 10 years, that'll ripple and we'll be able to be one of those big media markets and land a free agent. I love it. And I'm going to put, for all the listeners, I'm going to put the link in the iTunes description so you guys can click and purchase those tickets. Dave, I really appreciate you jumping on, and thanks for all your insight. And maybe about halfway through the season or so, we'll get you back on and we can kind of talk how the Suns are doing. And again, I appreciate everything.
Hey, well, thanks a lot for having me on, man. I really appreciate being invited, and I do hope some people take me up on that ticket offer. I think it's great. you feel like a better person. A lot of people can't even go to Suns games because they don't live in town. Well, this is a way to send someone as a proxy for you. So just donate $16 and send a kid to cheer for you at a Suns game.
Awesome. Thanks again, Dave.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.